Call the informational meeting to order. First item on the agenda is an update from the City Clerk, Deborah Owen, and budget presentation. Deborah?
Pardon me. Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. As you know, the budget hearings were for all of the Mondays, and hopefully the first 3 Mondays, but we didn't get the council's budget hearing in, so I'll do that briefly for you today. And also to remind you that there's a capital projects tour on Wednesday, 1:30. It was scheduled to leave from the Carnegie Town Hall, and now it will be leaving from the Farmers Market. So you'll need to meet there at 1:30. All right, to begin, the council is a legislative branch, as you know. Back in 1994, the citizens of Sioux Falls voted and changed our form of government from from a commission to a home rule and strong mayor form of government. That strong mayor form of government emulates that federal system with that strong executive, and then you have that legislative branch. And so I took this portion from our home rule charter, which just denotes the scope of the council. The council shall act as a part-time policy-making and legislative body, avoiding the management and administrative issues. And then from your mission statement, because back in 2007, the council had a strategic planning session, and you had your goals and objectives. And along that line, you also passed or voted on a mission statement. This can be found on siouxfalls.org under City Council, but your mission is to protect and enhance the quality of life for all residents by providing efficient and effective customer-focused services through establishing policies and appropriating money for those policies, which are implemented by the administration. And then our portion of the total city budget is about 0.3%. As you know, the city budget is about $337 million, and the city council is a little over $1 million. There's several departments, internal service departments, that have about $1 million budget, and likewise the council does too. And then breaking that number out, that $1 million out, into personnel and to other expenses. Personnel is about $750,000 estimated, and then the other is about $400,000. And just to remind council that, and really more to the public, council, of course, is a 8-member elected to serve part-time, and are made up of 5 districts and 3 at-large. And so of those 8, you have 7 staff persons who serve you as full-time employees. So the City Council has 7 FTEs, and those programs that are City Clerk's Office and the Internal Audit. And then a big part, as you know, we talked about this back in May when the Council approved your preliminary numbers, is the elections for 2010. In 2010, we anticipate having 3 elections, the municipal election in April 13th, then the runoff on April 27th, and then there is the hope or the possibility we're budgeting for joining the general election in November for the Events Center Task Force issue. And so that's a lot of the budget that was, actually that's the only part of our budget that was up for 2010 was elections. We didn't have any elections in 2009, so it's not an ongoing expense. It's one that hits us every other year. And in terms of your mission statement and being customer focused, I wanted to bring a couple of pictures just to kind of show you some reference points, because we didn't have an election this year, and usually we do. You'll find that we went through all of our forms and tried to make them more customer-focused, easy to understand, and looked for areas that we could perhaps help communicate some of the job of being a candidate and make those forms easier and more usable. So you'll see on the left-hand side there's a picture, there's a calendar that we have now given and made ready for candidates, those who are looking to run and those who have already established that they are running. And they can look at a glance to see what dates forms are turned in, if that's the certain dates that are significant to them. Nominating petitions and all those related forms are an easy one glance to look at, one reference point to look at for those months. Requirements by city charter. And then also for 2009, I know that many of you are aware, but the only forms that are due at this point in time are the statement of organization and the statement of financial interest for those folks who are being considered a candidate and want to run for office. And you can always find those forms online at siouxfalls.org. And then later in 2010, the first week in 2010, we'll see those first financial disclosure reports that will come forward to the council or come forward to the city clerk's office. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see that we always give to every candidate or those who are looking to run a copy of our city elections ordinance, Chapter 14, and then our city charter. That would be that first cover. It's kind of that contemporary stars and stripes. And then the other booklet we send out to each candidate is the campaign finance reporting guidelines. It has the step-by-step of what you need to know in terms of filing everything, including your nominating petitions. But the whole point is all very customer-friendly, trying to put all that information at the fingertips of those who are running for office. And then, as you know, in 2008, in off-mayoral election years, voter turnout is somewhat less, and so we had worked to try to generate some interest and create some better voter awareness of the 2008 election. And I think there were a number of things that we did. We sent out water bill inserts. We had candidate debates at our Carnegie Town Hall where they were able to debate other candidates who were running for office. Kind of a neat time for those candidates as they get to sit in the council chairs and then debate each other. And that's kind of a special time. It's web streamed. It's on Channel 16. And then also we received calls from the public at home who were interested in asking those candidates questions. But in addition, Channel 16 worked with us to help create a public service announcement. Let's see if I can click this. And you can watch it. My apologies. There was no audio. There was just simply music playing in the background. But with Channel 16's help, that did play on a number of cable channels, and I think that did help. Even though our voter turnout for 2008 was only 14%, it was clearly above what we thought it might be. And so I think all of those efforts did help in terms of helping voters remember that it was a municipal election day. And other things that we do in the office, of course, are the code codification, as this system of government emulates that federal system. Once council enacts legislation, there's follow-up work to be done. And one of the things that we do in terms of communicating to others about the actions the council has taken is simply to either codify law, whether it's online in an electronic form or in the hard copies that you can see a picture of there. But also we communicate to the Register of Deeds about land, annexations, and land rezones, and special assessments that are all recorded between the Lincoln and Minnehaha County auditors. Another thing we work at here on behalf of the council is records management, records retention, and records destruction, as I am the city archivist. And so you can see on one side, it's kind of a work in progress, as many of you know, but one side you can see our efforts so far this year. This is at the Records Retention Center. You can see that the box are properly labeled, easy identifiable. We've created a chain of custody, so that departments have assurances when their boxes leave their building and go to a different building that those boxes arrived safely and are accounted for. And so you can also see, though, on the right-hand side, we have a lot of work left to do. There's a lot of boxes that aren't always easily identifiable, and perhaps the person who placed those in the vaults has either moved on or been promoted, and so it's a process that I think will probably a couple of years in helping to clean up. But we're working on that, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that program. And then one of the things that we work with all council members on, and the scope of this kind of changes from time to time, so I called it council outreach because I think that really does kind of cover whatever the wills of the council are for those who the public elect. And so in this last year, looking back, we know that we had a number of coffee with the council meetings, and those were on Saturdays. And then from those really kind of developed into these community forums, which were very successful, that were put on by the council in terms of having those touch points with members in the community into what was important to them. And clearly in those community forums, I think the first one I had counted about 90 folks in the room, but it was a very interactive. It was a reach-out discussion between citizens and council members about what were their priorities. And the council, I think, did a great job of keeping those priorities within the scope of what the charter allows us to do. And so those 5 priorities have now been assigned to committee meetings or committees, and are actually being worked through and developed eventually into perhaps some policy changes by the council. So kind of some neat community outreach there. In addition, as you know, we have council member web pages, and then we have a short intro video on each of your homepage, which again is a touch point for citizens to come and kind of get to know you and get to know about what you're about in your bio page. And so it's more of a program that we kind of do under this. And then finally, we do constituent services at the request of council members. And primarily, this is really done more for the district council members who are perhaps meeting with people in their geographical area, and then looking to have correspondence with them, follow up, and thanking them, and things of that nature. And then finally, with one of the last things we do, which I think some of you are aware of in the clerk's office, but some may not be, we do a lot of Carnegie tours. And this is a group of Hawthorne Elementary kids. When we do large groups, we tend to have elected officials. We may have the mayor there if he's available, or a council member who may be available, police and fire department head, and they come in. We talk about the city and what's being talked about now. I can tell that's Denise. I think it's Denise up there who's talking to the kids, but explaining the districts, how the council members are elected. She usually talks about a pizza, each slice of pizza, and she kind of has this cute analogy that she shares with the kids. If it's a small group, you'll find that there'll be a mock city council, and we have a mayor, and we have council members. And they take votes, and we have kids out in the audience who are their constituents, and they might vote about whether they want to legalize or make candy illegal, or what's their favorite flavor of ice cream. And it's just a lot of fun, just something that we do here on behalf of community outreach for the council. And then a fairly new program with the audit, with the council, but not all that, several years old now, is the internal audit program under the City Council, and the Council authorizes the annual audit plan. That's what a picture of this is. Every year, Council votes on and establishes what they will audit in the ensuing year. And just so you know, the Audit Committee is actually looking at developing that again for 2010, so if you have any ideas to put forward to the internal audit group or to the Audit Committee, you may want to do that at this time. But also, Council appoints the committees, and then the employees are all appointed who serve on internal audit. The Audit Committee is comprised of 3 citizens and 2 council members, and their minutes can be found online at siouxfalls.org under City Council. Just to kind of look back at what they've done in this last year in terms of their program, they've issued about 17 reports to the council. A few of those reports have gone on to committees where council have considered policy changes or are considering policy changes about some of those. But they hope to have about 15 audit reports to you this year. I think they have some that are scheduled shortly to come before the council in the month of September. And as you know, most of our budget really is about elections, but I wanted to throw up a picture of a camel because I didn't know if Benega had forgotten what they look like. But that's it.
Any questions for Deborah? What people may not realize is that on the other half of that picture is Councilor Benega's lips against that camel as part of there was what was it, the Center for Active Generations, and you ended up kissing him. Did you catch her name? Did you? Okay. That's good. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is Mayor Munson's office. Anybody here to speak on behalf of the mayor? If not, we'll move on to the Audit Committee, which have no report other than we'll have a report next Tuesday from Rich on a new audit report. Fiscal Committee?
No report other than next Tuesday evening, a week from tomorrow, we'll have a Fiscal Committee meeting right after the informational meeting.
Land Use?
I'll fill in for Kermit, no report.
Okay. Public Service Committee?
We're meeting out of order. We're going to meet right after this meeting, and the agenda is on the back side of your informational agenda.
Okay. Any questions about any of the above? If not, we'll move into council discussions or any items on Councilor Litz.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Yes, Vernon and I a while back went to a meeting of citizens up in the north end that were concerned about degradation of their neighborhood, certain problem tenants and landlords, properties becoming dilapidated, abandoned properties and such. And even since then, I've had several conversations with more tenants. It's a growing problem up there, I think, as a perception, and whether that's correct or not, I guess doesn't matter if the perception's there. But and so I've been paying a lot of attention, doing a lot of drives, and I think that we do need to head someplace with this. And I am setting up an appointment with Erica Beck pretty soon to discuss city involvement, and I think the gist of where we want to go with this is to kind of get behind a group of citizens up there and help them to help themselves on the situations in this neighborhood. Now, a while ago, one of the tenants sent me some things that other municipalities are doing to alleviate these types of situations, and one of the main ideas that seemed to come forth was that they had ordinances on their books that identified public nuisance properties, and it helped them in a legal situation to close them down. Now, Mr. City Attorney Bob over there, I sent you an email a while back, and I don't know if you were prepared to discuss any of those things today. The ordinances that I sent you from other cities?
Is that with the gentleman on the prairie?
Yes, that's right.
I'd have to say, get very candid to you, no.
Okay, very good. If sometime you'd have a look at those, and if you'd come by and give us I'm very interested in your opinion on that. And to find out if there's something further that we can do that would aid the efforts in the Whittier neighborhood, in the Pettigrew neighborhood, and now in this North End neighborhood that we're going to try to organize. And if any of the other counselors are interested in meeting with myself and Erica Beck on this situation, I'd be glad to include you in on the the emails or the list or whatever we start there. And KDLT contacted me a while back and wanted to do a little bit. And so today we went to a couple of those problem areas and spoke a little bit. So I don't know if that's going to be on there or not. I know a while back the Argus did a little piece on it. But I've been getting, like I said, I've been getting contacted by different people up in that North End. So it's an issue that we're going to have to, in my estimation, we're going to have to deal with. And what form that's going to take, I don't know. But if you want to be part of that process, I'd appreciate it. So.
Why don't you send us an email when you're ready to
I'll
do
just
that?
Okay. I'll get it back to Deborah and have it sent out to everybody, because I'm a 56-year-old male who doesn't really know how to work my computer all that well. So I'll get some assistance on it.
Justice, that same email with all those other ordinances from other cities, Erica Beck and Mike Cooper, I sent it to them as well, so you may want to check with them to see if they've looked at and studied those at all, too.
Councilor Knudsen?
Just regarding the comments, as far as the northern area of our city, I haven't had any calls myself recently from anyone up there, but your comments reminded me that quite a few years ago, I probably was just a rookie city councilor then, is that the city actually went up there one evening and at the park, and we just had many of the different department heads there and a bunch of city councilors, and we tried to encourage them to establish a neighborhood watch. And I don't know, it might be time to think about something like that. Again, we didn't have thousands of people, but the ones who came were real interested, and it was, I felt like it was a worthwhile evening. So that's just a thought. And then on my own comments, or other comments, I guess, is again, as you all know, I'm on the Sioux Falls Sports Authority, and you all know that we have received a bid for 2 years after this coming March for the Summit League basketball tournament. But I just wanted to remind everyone here and the listening public that tickets go on sale for this March 6th to 9th tournament, Summit League tournament, on August 31st. And you can go to www.ticketmaster.com for your tickets. So that's my commercial on Summit League Sports Authority for today. And then I wanted to also just tell you all that I attended a Municipal League Public Health, Safety and Welfare Committee meeting in Pierre on August 20th, and there were about 14 of us at that particular committee meeting, and I have to confess I haven't been what you call a stellar Municipal League attender attendee or whatever. But I really was glad that I went to the meeting, and our fire chief was there at this committee meeting also. And one of the most interesting topics that we discussed during that period of time was just the whole 9/1 issue, as far as some of us like me would really like to see that that fee increased, because it has not been increased for years and years and years to help the city and the county. But I learned a couple things that day that you might already know. That one, there is a 911 task force through Municipal League that has been established, and at this time that commission is not endorsing any increase. And I also learned that in the entire state of South Dakota there are 36 centers in the 911 centers, but they really vary. I mean, like one place has a 911 center in a daycare center, as opposed to a standalone operation. So if I understood those folks correctly, it's like that task force wants to kind of study all the 36 centers that exist right now and not mandate any consolidation at this point, but to kind of just learn what all is out there. And then I also learned that our chief of police, Doug Barthel, is on that task force. But again, the last increase was in the early 90s, and so anyway, I wanted to share that with you. And then there was also a discussion regarding statewide radio updates, and I found that very timely. And then I saw the article in the paper over the weekend about the Lincoln County, Minnehaha County's views on turning back Homeland Security money for a statewide radio system that works well in emergencies. And that was interesting. And then we went across the room and we met with another committee just briefly to talk about the possibility of encouraging our legislators to think a little bit more about local option, to allow communities throughout the state to, if the community chooses, is to increase its sales tax. And of course, as you all know, I am extremely supportive of that. And I actually encourage that group to be very positive with their legislators, and I also reminded them that, this bit about, well, it's an election year, that I just think we shouldn't get slowed down in that, because every other year is an election year for legislators, so that doesn't work for me personally. And I also reminded them that Councilor Costello and I had made quite a few calls last winter to legislators throughout the state, and we had received a really positive review from those legislators. And so I was a cheerleader, as you can imagine, for that proposal.
Councilor Litz?
Councilor Knudsen, I can assure you we'll need those efforts again this year here. I think we've got a few other booths and a pretty good shot at getting her through there. So if you'd help us again this year, that'd be terrific.
I would do everything I could to help get this done, and I really think that we should. I told that group in Pierre that we should not be defensive, we should not be apologetic, we should share the real needs out there, and we really should talk about local option, because I do not believe that all wisdom resides in Pierre, even in the winter.
I believe that comment alone, too. The other couple of things that I'd like to bring up is on October 2nd at Augustana College at the Ullman Center, Pervez Musharraf is going to be here. And it's very, very seldom that Sioux Falls gets somebody from the international spectrum like that has just recently has stepped down from power and has been so close to so many things that we hear about on the news every evening. And very interesting I just encourage you, if you have an opportunity to get there, just get a hold of Augustana College. Attendance is free. There's a limited number of tickets, and I bet the place will be packed, but I'd encourage you to go there. The other thing that would concern the city councilors here is the Municipal League in South Dakota, and that's Pat and I think we're going to go up there on Wednesday and Thursday of October. That'd be the 7th and the 8th, but the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th is a Municipal League meeting. Looks like a pretty good one, actually, and it's in Watertown, so if you want to go up there for a day or 2 days, why, I'd advise you to contact somebody from our clerk's office, and they'll fix you up. So, but I just want to remind everybody of those two things.
Councilor Jameson?
Just a real quick, I had an incident with the Sioux Falls Police Department on Saturday. I thought I'd let you guys know before you read about it in the Argus Leader. At 5:15, I started a ride-along ride with the police department, so nothing real serious. But I just wanted to let you know, I saw people being mean to other people drunk, people fighting, people speeding. I got to see a lot of things happen in the city that I really hadn't seen before. People looking for a boogeyman, like all kinds of things. But first and foremost, what I saw was the officer that I was with, Shelley Slattery was her name. Just a great example of our public service in action. She was out of the car faster than you could imagine. I'm trying to find the doorknob, trying to get out, and she's already out of the car, backing up another officer. I just wanted to share that I had a great experience riding with the police department. And I never did ride in the back, which is good. I did ride in the passenger seat. But I also wanted to make sure everybody knows if they want to do a ride-along, certainly the council is available to do that. You guys know that, and I know some of you guys have done that. I would certainly encourage it if you haven't. But also the public, if they wanted to, they can log on to the police department's website and find out the procedures they need to go through to get a ride-along. But it's a great experience, and I'm sure proud of what the police department does. So,
Councilor Knudsen?
I just wanted to say to Councilor Litz is that I am registered for Municipal League 2, and I actually wrote myself a note on my calendar that the theme for that one event that evening is a beach party, so I think we better get our beach balls and towels and
Quorum?
sunscreen out for the party.
And I believe Council Brown is going,
Yes.
and so we'll probably have a quorum at the beach party. That'll be ugly.
Got that, Jonathan?
Any other comments before open discussion before going into our presentations?
Just a quick question. Are we going to discuss the budget adoption night? We had a memo from Deborah on that. And I did have a question for Deborah regarding that. The last paragraph on that page, remind me of the history behind on the amendments to veto and veto override went on the appropriation as well, which was unusual.
Yeah, actually, the only time that I'm aware of that council ever amended the appropriation ordinance was last year. Generally, the appropriation ordinance just simply reflects the budget that was adopted in September, and then the vetoes would happen there, and then the veto overrides would happen, and that's a resolution, because you're kind of keeping separate. First you have the resolution for your CIP and your operating, and then you have the appropriation ordinance and the annual tax levy. And so I think that was part of the dialogue that had come through fiscal committee. But yes, did I answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
So to get this straight, the mayor can override a resolution, well, and the appropriation, you can override both. And so as it stands right now, we're set to do it on September 14th. And the question is whether or not we want to separate those and push the appropriation ordinance into October. Correct?
I remember us having that discussion as a fiscal committee, but I can't remember all the ins and outs. Tom, can you refresh our memories?
And I think at that time it centered more about the property tax levy, having a definitive number on the property tax levy. And we got comfortable with the estimate part of it, but we didn't see this part coming.
So what were the benefits we were talking about in terms of doing the resolution and the appropriation on the same night?
Tom Huber with the Finance Office. I think the main thing for the discussion centered around, well, everything's fresh in your mind, you've got the budget in front of you, to just go ahead and do them both at the same time. You just got done with hearings, you just got done discussing the budget, going through the amendment process of the budget, just taking them all at the same time potentially, and not having to come back a month later and refresh your memory exactly what all happened and where things were at. So.
I guess as it stands now, if we make amendments to the resolutions, then we will have to make amendments to the appropriation ordinance as well then.
Yeah, actually, usually when the council if you make amendments and there's as it was adopted in September, then the appropriation ordinance just reflects all of those changes. Those are incorporated into that appropriation ordinance, so you don't amend twice, you simply amend once. If you take the the uniqueness of last year's appropriation ordinance. Yeah, generally you just do it once. You have to do it twice this time. And if there's a veto override or necessary for that, then you need to do that again. So.
Councilor Knudsen?
Just speaking for myself, obviously, but I'm very fine with the schedule we have in place. I actually thought we had decided this some time ago, so I'm a little bit surprised that we're rehashing it again, but that's always okay, too. And I remember after the last discussion, we had an opinion from the city attorney's office that, regarding the, estimate of the levy as opposed to the exact number, and I'm really just fine with the schedule, and if, in fact, there's some veto that we could call a special meeting in an instant. So that's my vote.
Councilor Bennigan?
Yeah, I agree with what Dee just said, and what Vernon said was the only concern that we had at the time was the estimate versus an actual number, and I don't know that that's ever been off by very far. I think the real issue for me right now is to get this done in one evening rather than rehashing it over a period of time. But the other thing would be a deadline on when we need to have the amendments. I think is more of an important issue than doing this all in one evening. And I think we've needed at least a week in some cases to be able to do that. So my recommendation to the rest of the council would be that by next week from Tuesday.
Generally, you have them in before this weekend, and then there's a draft sent back to you, so you can look at it next week. But you could perhaps delay that. But usually, you have them in a couple of weeks ahead of time, and then.
Why do we need 2 weeks?
Because they'll be prepared for you, then they'll go back to make sure that it's what you wanted. To make sure that it says exactly what you wanted it to say. Sometimes there's some communication between the written and what you really want, and so just as a safety, that's what we've used in the past, about 2 weeks. So.
Well, from my schedule, I think 2 weeks is too long, and frankly, this week is just about as filled as possible for me to finish going through the budget. I don't know if I can get stuff to the people by the end of this week. It's just not going to work.
Well, I guess from that standpoint that, if councilors have amendments that they'd like to propose now and they can get them on the table and in the hopper, that's great. To the extent that that's not possible and they have to be brought forward next week, then that, we'll have to make it work.
Well, certainly if people want to do them sooner, I have no problem with that, but I think 2 weeks is more than enough time to clarify communication issues.
If you want finance to draft those and help you with that process, we can do it on a fairly quick turnaround time frame. The issue probably is how much time going back and forth, making sure it reads right, but we can move that around pretty easily, so we're pretty comfortable with,
Do you have a deadline that you would recommend?
We didn't set a specific deadline this year, just because we didn't know if we were going to prepare those, the clerk's office was going to prepare those, how you wanted to run those amendments.
In the past, we've had a couple of weeks to work with you guys, but, whatever you guys want to do is fine. So if you want to do it in a week.
Well, certainly encourage people to get them to you as soon as possible. That's not the issue. The issue is I think we need to have a deadline, period. Otherwise, we'll be going back and forth all the time. And I'm wondering if I
may, the only thing we would want is that if you have kind of something that's a rough estimate, then the department's going to have to research it. Okay, how much was that service level? How much was that item? Just to give them enough lead time to get a couple days so they get the right number. But otherwise, it's pretty flexible.
if we have the weekend, maybe set it up for the deadline of the 8th, is that going to give you enough time or not?
And that would be the Tuesday?
Tuesday, week from tomorrow? I think 2 weeks, it's just too long, frankly, for me.
Councilor Litz?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This would be for the clerks. Are either one of you aware of when Mr. Staggers will return?
He'll be back on the 8th, and I do have his amendments, so he'll be back
You
on
have,
the 8th.
okay.
Yeah.
I know
He's
this is
prepared
one of
ahead
his
time.
favorite times of the year,
Yep.
so.
I think you could just go back to last year and see most of those again.
I didn't want to disinclude him.
No, obviously, he needs to be included, but I think if he's already got his amendments in, then maybe we should see those as they come in also, so we don't have a boatload of them all at one time.
I think in the past, we've kept amendments private until,
the council member decides. Usually that you release those all at
So we
your
just
will.
violated our own policy by saying that we don't need them in? You got to have them in 2 weeks sooner, and then we don't get to see them until a week before?
no, I think it was up to each individual counselor to decide whether or not they wanted to provide their amendments to the rest of the group beforehand or not.
Okay.
Although the Friday before, they go out to everybody, including the public and department heads, to give everybody knowledge of what's going on. So we do release them at one point in time.
Okay, so we'll go with the deadline around Tuesday, the 8th, 4 o'clock, whatever, after the meeting. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is the presentations, monthly financial update by Gene Roanhorse. That doesn't look like Gene. Tom Huber.
At all.
As I said earlier, Tom Huber, standing in for Gene Roanhorse from the Finance Office. First thing I want to start out with was just to ask if there were any specific questions or areas that you wanted to cover during this monthly report. We'd be happy to cover those pages or those areas. If not, I'll just have a couple comments regarding our general fund and then one other item inside the report. So, if nothing specific, I'll run right into the report and start on page 1. I thought here's where I'd spend most of my time and just kind of do a brief overview again of what this page tells you, what the general fund is about. It's again our primary operating account. It just came out of the budget. Constitutes, except for the enterprise funds, like I said, most of the operating expenditures. The report is really set up, it's a point-in-time report. And if you recall during the budget process, and we did a contingency planning presentation earlier this year, we're really focused, or our focus right now is on the longer-term planning horizon and looking at the trends, where are we going, how are we going to continue to meet the service levels and the demands for service that we have, and just be aware of what's happening, preparing for what's happening, and have contingency plans in place and be able to prioritize spending and service levels. So if we look at the report, the first section really deals with the unreserved fund balance, the reserves of the city. And really key in on the budget on this part of the report as the actuals will change during the year. We don't aren't on full accrual during the year. We make our accruals at the end of the year. We have property tax, which comes in twice a year, which can skew things, and also the various departments' seasonality is not taken into consideration when you're looking at the actuals. So really focusing on the current budget and asking ourselves, is there anything that's throwing us off from the current budget? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Of course there is. Our revenue is not coming in as anticipated or as planned. And so we certainly do have plans in place as to what's happening with those revenues and how that impacts the bottom line. As you can see there, our estimate at the end of the year, we had a balanced budget that was adopted last year, and the estimate there was for about an unreserved fund balance of 42.1 at the end of the year, 42.1 million, about 35.6% of the general fund spending for the upcoming year. A key point to this is, again, the planning process. Now, that reserve is there for a specific reason, as we've got capital projects coming online in the future that we have to deal with. So really looking at that as this is what it's anticipated to be at the end of this year, but there are demands against that going forward into 2010, 2011, 2012 as we bring those projects online and plan ahead. The other section of this report is the current cash balance. That just kind of tells you where we're at today for a cash standpoint. Again, that slowly slides as we come into the November timeframe when we get our second half property tax payment. So May, June, July, it starts to build up, and then it starts to draw down as we only receive our property tax allocation twice a year, and the other revenues continue to roll on through there, but you'll see that start to slide. Getting down to the last point, the budget status, the last portion of this report. And here you can see, and again, the focus is probably not so much on the point in time. The focus is on the trends that we're seeing. As in the case of property tax, now we'll start to see that slip against the budget. We don't adjust for the fact that we get our property tax payment twice a year. So you'll see that start to slide off, but we're fairly confident that we'll get most of our property tax dollars. Sales tax. Well, we know sales tax is coming in flat with what I'd like to call a negative tilt. And so we just put out today our August numbers, which shows us down 3.6%. This report shows us down 0.4% in sales tax collections. Now, in the message I sent out on the 3.6% down, we noted that the cutoff date was a few days earlier than when the filing cutoff date was for tax having to be filed with the state. We don't know exactly how much that impacted the numbers, but it possibly had some impact to the numbers. So, key point being, we know the sales tax revenues were not coming on as initially budgeted for, and earlier this year, and I'm going to skip ahead, we went through a contingency plan where we talked about preparing, planning, and prioritizing for what we anticipated was a $5 to $6 million shortfall in revenues. That was our original estimates way back in January and February, and that we could be coming in as much as $5 to $6 million short. We would say right now, at this point, when you look at the report, we're probably at the upper end of that, upwards of the $6 million shortfall in revenue. Could be more, could be less, depending upon where a few other things shake out. On the revenue side, licenses and permits, we're down in that area, obviously, and as building permits make up a significant portion of that. We received more than we anticipated in the bank franchise tax, so that was a plus to help balance against some of this, to the tune of $1.3 million. And then investment revenue, last year, if you recall, we took a significant markup. As interest rates had fallen, we took a markup to our securities that we hold in our portfolio. Well, this year, as interest rates rebound a little bit, you'll see that we have to take markdowns. So there's a markdown in this, and we anticipated that, prepared for that. So overall revenue, if you look at the 51% of budget to date, you might think of that as almost more 54% in that range when you factor in that we should probably account for 1 month of the second half property taxes that we get. So we know we're short on the revenue side. Then we come down to the expenditure side, and as we shared in our contingency planning, we anticipated that we would be holding back or saving inside of the budget and estimated between 4% and 5%. And if you look at the report, we're probably on track at this point to achieve that 4% to 5% budget savings. We won't know until the snow is done flying as to whether that all materializes or not. But we talked about having normal personnel savings. We talked about savings from the fuel and other costs that we were not hit with the inflationary impacts that we expected. And also then the departments are holding the line on spending. So they have specific targets that they're shooting for to hold the line. So all in all, if you look at the general fund at this point, it's probably a 50-50 shot whether we get that balance to zero or not, whether we actually have to dip into the unreserved fund balance this year or not. Obviously, next year's budget anticipates that we will dip into the unreserved fund balance as a plan. But so that's kind of where we're at with the general fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the general fund page. I have one more little area to cover, but otherwise, any questions on covering in the general fund? One area, small detail, back in the report on page 14 and 15. I won't cover any of those sections of the report unless anybody has questions. I wanted to mainly just lay out the kind of the primary operating and where we were at today. Is on page 14 towards the bottom, you'll notice we have a dozer that's in the sanitary landfill fund that looks like it was unanticipated. It cost about $740,000. Actually, if you flip the page over to page 15, you'll notice that it was actually budgeted in fleet. There's a compactor in there, Project 929 inside of fleet, where it was budgeted. What happened is and these are an internal service fund and an enterprise fund, but we initially anticipated that would probably be purchased on a lease program. When we bid it out, it was decided that it would be better off, the city would be in a better position if we purchased that piece of equipment straight out. So we did purchase that equipment. And it makes no sense to transfer money back and forth and have fleet our landfill just send the money over to fleet. So instead, we just purchased it straight out of landfill to save the extra accounting. So the item was anticipated, was planned, but again, it was the difference between, when all was said and done, purchase rather than lease. Otherwise, I don't have anything further on the...
Councilor Benninger?
Tom, on the purchase versus the lease payments were probably accrued for the expense on an annual basis. What's the difference between the lease payment and the purchase price, and how'd you account for that in the total budget?
I can't give you the exact difference between that, but landfill had the cash available in order to make the purchase. Fleet could have made the purchase as well, but like I said, it was just decided that the better option was to go ahead and purchase it, and then to purchase directly from landfill. Landfill would have paid Fleet the full amount of the purchase regardless, even though it was budgeted in Fleet. I don't know what the amount of the lease versus the purchase was.
Could you send us an email on that, please?
Sure could. Yep, we can follow up with all the information on that item.
Tom, you indicated there was a 5 or 6% holdback on the capital program. What's that translate into dollars?
On the capital side of the program, the holdback, if you go to page, it's actually a little bit over what we initially set out as our amount. The holdback on the capital side is $5.3 million. You can see that on the bottom of page 12. That's what's being held back. We talked about the operating account and what the departments were holding the line on spending. The capital account, the sales tax fund, is a little bit different. In that case, if the money doesn't come in, we don't have a contingency in place. We don't have that unreserved fund balance like we do in the general fund. So on the capital side of things, in the sales tax fund for general capital, we have to hold back money if we're not, or projects if we're not making the revenue estimate.
So you're holding back this 5% on the general fund?
5.3. The general fund, the estimate, it's not all holdback. Some of it is just what we expect for turnbacks, is between 4 and 5%. So we estimated normal personnel savings. I think I wrote the budget numbers down here somewhere.
And the personnel savings, how are you doing that through not hiring as attrition goes on?
Always the time lag in hiring is what happens in that, and you always have to budget for the worst-case scenario. You're budgeting for being 100% staff, everybody taking the options they can have for health insurance and that type of thing. So you're generally towards you're budgeting for the most you're going to spend in personnel. Well, you have people leave employment, whether they retire, resign, whatever, and you've got a lag. And so there's savings that build up over that time frame, and then you hire in at a lower amount than somebody who just retired, so you can't account for all those things. But so that personnel accounts for, I want to say about 2% of what the savings we expect for normal personnel savings would be about 2%. The fuel savings we estimated at about 0.5%, and then the department's holding the line on spending, we estimated that at a little over 2%. To get us to the 4.5%, again, hoping to be in that 4 to 5% range. And right now, it would indicate that we were kind of on track for that. If you look at, we're 55% spent for 58% of the year elapsed, so we're kind of trending into that. Again, snow will.
Councilor Brown?
Tom, on the CIP side of it, we're seeing some cost savings, aren't we, in the construction costs being lower than anticipated? So is that where we're going to see that savings, or are we doing more projects as a result of that savings?
On the CIP side, they have their holdbacks, and with the savings, they're able to complete some of those projects that normally they might not have been able to complete. So it's allowing us to, again, we've got the target for what we're holding back, and then it allows them to utilize the money that's saved beyond the amount that we estimate we need to hold back to complete those other projects that are on the list.
Councilor Litz?
Tom, I remember getting back to this dozer subject. I know that when we talked about this, I think it was a year ago, the price of the dozers had doubled during that time, and that was when everything was up. They went from $380,000 up to what they are here now. Are we committed to? Is that dozer already out at the city landfill, or is that price $740? Pardon me?
That's been purchased.
Has been purchased. Okay. Now I thought we had two of them that we were looking at. Are both of them out there?
I couldn't answer.
Couldn't say,
We'll get
okay.
back to you on all the specifics.
All right, well, what I was getting at is if they weren't, maybe today the price of that thing has gotten back to where it's reasonable instead of $740,000.
Big piece of equipment.
Councilor Jameson?
Tom, if it all works out that we're $6 million short at the end of the year, you'll take that $6 million out of the contingency fund, is that right?
Well, if we're $6 million short on the revenue side, we are going to have expenditure savings on that side as well. So we don't anticipate, like I said, right now it's probably a 50-50 chance whether we balance revenues to expenditures at the end of the year. So first of all, you get the savings from the expenditures, and then whatever's left over would come out of the unreserved fund balance. But it's not anticipated that we'd spend the whole amount of the budget. So, we might be short, let's say, $1 million. It's tough to know at this point exactly how things will turn out by the time we're done plowing and have some of the other costs in. But at this point, the expenditures are trending below as well. So we're hopeful that we'll have good expenditure savings.
Help me along here, I just want to understand this better. If indeed we do work out and it's a shortfall, it's $1 million, say,
Okay.
that then would come from our unreserved fund.
That is correct.
And until that point where maybe things correct out and we are no longer in a, let's just say next year rolls along and we stay at the same flat level, we could draw money again from the still unreserved account until we get to a point where we're below our 25% policy target number, right? Just to say the future looks bleak.
Well, and that's something we look for and we put on the board to talk about when we looked at the budget, kind of looking to the future and what happens to that trend line as to when do we hit the 25% line, when might we go below the 25% line, and the changes that we might want to make as we get closer to that and we see how things develop out. Because if we do miss this year and we do and if 2010 doesn't look like as we have it budgeted, well, then we're going to do the same thing in 2010 as we should always do, and that is to be looking at being aware of where we're at, planning and prioritizing and making spending changes as we need to as we go forward as well. So, and looking even further ahead to those large capital projects that we have coming on board that we know eventually affect, you had a fire station, eventually affect the operating budget. So you start looking out a ways. And our budgeting technique now is to not look just year to year, but to keep a forecast in front of everybody from a policy standpoint to say, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it, and here's kind of the plan if everything goes. What we know is everything isn't the way you plan it. And so you're always revising your plan.
Just real quick, if I could, that magic date again that you've projected out, if it was flat growth and the expenditures kind of continue down and upward, I remember we saw that
Right.
timeline. When was that date of doom?
We went out 10 years on the budget. So we went out to, I believe, was it 2017? I have the presentation graph here. We went out to 2019, and we showed how that line initially came down. In 2010, you ended up somewhere at the end of 2010, if everything turns out as expected, in that 30% reserve position. You slowly, as you had the COPS grant expire and added a fire station, you got the West Side Library coming online, you've seen that just dipped below that 25% line. Pretty well came off the between 20 and 21%, and then started heading back up as you start to anticipate more normal revenue patterns again.
Thank you.
Again, we know that one thing we know is that will change. But again, we change with it and we plan accordingly.
Councilor Bennigan?
Well, I guess the bottom line, from my perspective, is that the revenue at the end of August is down 3.6%, but the expenses are down 4% at the same period of time. The discussion that we have in the future about policy issues about what's going to be spent for capital improvement programs will have to be adjusted as the year progresses, correct?
Yeah, well, as the year progresses and as you get ready to start your 2011 process all over again, as we finish up 2010, we'll, in a couple months, we'll know how 2009 ended, and we'll start it all over again in 2010, and whether we have to put additional projects on hold back, or if the economy changes and we're able to free some of that budget up to do the project. So.
And then the other thing I want to clarify is at this point in time, we still are at 35.6% in fund balance compared to the 25% policy that we have.
I think that's a year-end number, though, isn't it?
That's an estimate.
That's
right
an
now.
estimate of what it would be if everything was budgeted to happen as it was set up as a balanced budget. So if we miss it by $1 million, that might pull off 1% or so, but again, that's why you set up a plan, is to use, we talked about, looking at our spending priorities and making sure to use the reserve wisely.
Councilor Brown?
For Councilor Jamison, just a little bit of history on the balanced budget resolution. This is really we're able to have these kinds of discussions as a result of passing this council doing that about 3 years ago. Before, there was no policy on how much we needed to have in that rainy day fund. And then the fiscal committee worked on it and worked with the finance office to determine that 25% is a safe rainy day fund for us to have. It's a benchmark for us to use, and it generates a good discussion like this for us to be able to see where that's at.
And if I could expound on that a little bit, and correct me where I'm wrong on this, Tom, but that 25% was a year-end number.
Yes,
and
it is.
The tougher number to meet is the monthly number, which was the 11% target policy. And if I recall, the 11% of our general fund basically was what we need to cash flow the cities to carry us through those times when our property tax receipts, we whittle them down right before we get to that next payment in.
You're in that 10 to 15% range for cash flow, depending upon the year. So, yeah, you're looking at a portion of that being for cash flow. So if you say that's between 10 and 15%, then the other portion is kind of reserves on top of that.
So,
and I think the key is to plan ahead, because you have some spending coming on board. We don't want to get to 2012 and say we have to hire 15 or 16 new firefighters, and where are we going to fund that from? We've got a plan already in place to deal with that, and that's why we build up the reserves and take them back down during those times. And so it does provide, in addition to a buffer, a forecast into the future.
Councilor Knudsen?
Well, and also, going forward, it's obviously very possible, too, that the next city council, might decide that the 25% figure is just a little bit higher than need be. I mean, it's not a sacred number, it's just the policy in place, and I agree with Councilor Brown that it allows us to have this discussion now, but I am very comfortable with the, finance experts that we have working for our city 24/7, and, it's very possible maybe that, if need be, we want to continue services at the level we have them currently, and if the revenue stays flat longer than we wish, that the new council might decide to lower that 25% a little bit.
Councilor Litz?
I agree philosophically with Councilor Knudsen. I'm very comfortable. We've had these discussions, in broad terms in years gone by, and as I've come to appreciate how the budget works, I'm just very comfortable with the job that you and Rowan Horst and your staff have been doing. It doesn't mean I'm not going to sit here and look at you and ask a few questions in the future, but I'll just give you a vote of confidence today.
Thank you. That's
Any
all
other
we want to do, is
questions?
put that out there on the general fund. So I was kind of timely with the budget coming up. So.
Thank you, Tom. There's no other questions? Okay, any other items to come before the council on the information meeting? If none, we will adjourn. Public service meets immediately following this meeting. All is welcome. Thanks very much.